This weekly reading starts, of course, with the laws of Shabbat, and in particular the Torah says, Lo tivaru esh b'chol moshvatechem b'yom HaShabbat. Don't kindle fire in all your dwellings on the day of Shabbat. So there are a few questions to be asked. First of all, why does the Parshat mainly deals with construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan? Why would it start with Shabbat? And I'm sure most people know the answer, that of course we learn the specific laws of Shabbat from the fact that the construction of the Mishkan was stopped on Shabbat. That means that no labor that was done in order to complete the Mishkan was permitted to be continued on Shabbat. So that's where the sages find the 39 so-called Melachot, 39 types of labor that are forbidden on Shabbat. Anything that they had to do in order to construct the tabernacle. And they even find in these verses a remez, a kind of hint to the number 39. There are a few different opinions in the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmud exactly how it's hinted, and it's not really that important, the actual number. It's rare that the number of Melachot is of any specific importance. Although there are some interesting ramazim, some interesting hints to this number. 39 is, of course, one less than 40, and it's the number of times that a sinner would be flogged also. And there is this idea that the world was created through 40 works, but one of them is creating out of nothing. So that we can't do anyway, so what's left is 39. Whatever the case may be, the verse specifically mentions one type of melacha, lo tivaru esh, don't kindle fire. Why would it mention it? And especially, the question is, why does it say b'yom HaShabbat, on the Sabbath day? It didn't have to say b'yom HaShabbat because the whole paragraph is talking only about Shabbat. Obviously it's talking about Shabbat. What else can it be talking about? So there are a number of explanations, one of which has to do with the distinction between Yom Tov, a holiday, and Shabbat. In Jewish law, Shabbat is more strict than regular holidays. That is, except for Yom Kippur. On all other holidays except Yom Kippur, you're allowed to, in fact, kindle fire. There are specific, of course, limitations. You're allowed only to light a fire from existing fire, or increase, for instance, the gas on the gas range. You're not allowed to light completely new fire. This may be a rabbinical prohibition, or maybe it's a biblical prohibition, but whatever the case may be, there are at least some laws, there are some at least permissions on Yom Tov, since it's permitted to cook on Yom Tov, as the Torah says in Parshat Bo. Whatever is needed for food, you're allowed to do. So since you're allowed to cook, you're allowed also to lit fire in certain ways, whatever those ways are. Whether the Torah would permit even new fire, or only lighting from existing fire, but at least there are permissions on Yom Tov. On Shabbat, of course, no fire can be lit, not from existing fire, not increasing the fire, nothing is permitted in that respect. And that's why the Torah mentions that you have to not light any fire b'yom HaShabbat, on Shabbat specifically, as opposed to Yom Tov. But there is a very interesting explanation given in a book called Maggid Meisharim. It's generally attributed to Rabbi Yosef Karo, of course the greatest halachic authority, the author of Shulchan Aruch. Besides writing many, many books on halacha, most of his writings are on halacha. Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote Beit Yosef, commentary on the Tur, Kesef Mishnah, commentary on Rambam, many Shalot v'Tshuvot, responsa, rabbinic responsa. But he was also a mystic. He also knew and learned Kabbalah. And there is a book that's generally attributed to him. It's probably not provable that he actually wrote that book, but at least it seems that he wrote that book where he claims, or the author claims, that it comes from the Maggid. Maggid was supposed to be an angel that is revealed to some righteous people, some mystics, and tells them certain things. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, for instance, quotes certain things from Maggid. There are a number of sages in our history that claimed that they saw some kind of visions with some kind of answers that they got from an angel. Now again, this is not provable that it's really a true vision. I don't know if anybody could know this for sure. This is not. We don't have prophets today. Real prophecy already ceased from more or less 2,500 years ago, right? The beginning of Second Temple period. So to know whether what you see is real vision or it's just something that comes from your own thoughts, I don't know if there is a way to prove it. Right? A person who always thinks about Torah, he will definitely see visions of Torah. Just like a person who thinks about physics will see dreams about physics. And maybe even some questions that he had about physics, he might be able to see it in a dream. There were a number of scientists who claimed that they discovered something in a dream. So this can be explained without any mysticism involved. If a person thinks about it all the time, he may actually, when the brain is relaxed, in hypnotic state, he may actually come up with an answer. That some scientists even used it a priori, this kind of method, to try to actually fall asleep with a question and see if they could come up with an answer in a semi dreaming state. But whatever the case may be, the claim is that these answers in Maggid Meisharim come from an angel. So you can take it any way you want. You could take it literally that Rabbi Yosef Karo had an angel who would reveal things to him, or it could be that his own thoughts generated something, or his own soul. By the way, some Mikubalim explain that the whole idea of Maggid has to do with a person's soul. Like the angel of a person is his own soul in a certain sense that's revealing to him. I won't go into this right now. At any rate, this book is an important and useful book. It doesn't matter what the source is. So he actually writes in this week's Parsha an interesting explanation. He says that the reason it says B'yom HaShabbat, on the day of Sabbath, you cannot lit the fire, is because of the Karaim, the people who would later claim, a sect that later claimed that you're not allowed to have fire in your house altogether on Shabbat, even if it's lit before Shabbat. They actually sat in the dark. Karaim sat in the dark. There are very few of them left today, but they sat in the dark on Shabbat. And they also didn't eat hot food for the same reason. They wouldn't have fire that would preserve the food warm throughout the day of Shabbat. So in the morning everything gets cold if you don't leave it on blech or on something that keeps the fire on. So they basically made Shabbat into a day of the worst, the lack of enjoyment of the worst kind. Sit in the dark, eat cold foods. Our sages, of course, emphasize that it's important to eat hot foods on Shabbat. It's important to have a candle that's lit. Usually women light the candles, but if there are no women, then the men light the candles. You shouldn't sit in the dark on Shabbat. And it says, Maggid Meisharim, that's why the Torah specifically points out, don't kindle fire b'yom HaShabbat, on the day of Shabbat specifically. On Sabbath day, you're not allowed to. Before Shabbat, you are allowed to. As our sages generally say, whenever various heretics have their arguments, right in those same verses, you could find a disproof of those arguments. Hashem knew that one day these people will claim that you're not allowed to have fire that's lit before Shabbat to be in your dwelling. So that's why he emphasized, B'yom HaShabbat, you cannot light fire on the Sabbath day, but you're allowed to light before. And on this I'm going to end for today. If you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.